Okay, so let's look at adding a latch into our library. Up to add custom hardware. We'll import a 3D model. So we've got a step file here of a latch. Autocase will import that into its own environment. So there's a couple of yellow lines running through it. You can ignore those. They're not crucial to anything. They just come with the step file. You can visibly hide them if you want to get rid of them from a visual point of view. So we're just doing that now on the left-hand side. So at this point, we need to create a sketch that is going to cut through the case. So we can do that by cut underneath, and then we select the face of the latch that will be essentially touching the case panel. So we've done that. That's now going to draw a sketch essentially connected to that face. So first of all, we're going to put in the construction lines. These are reference geometry. I've got some other videos about these. So we're just going to draw a couple of lines using geometry that's already in existence on the latch. So we're now going to need to find the middle of that latch. So we're doing that by drawing a small line first and then drawing another line off of the middle of that point. So we now have a line running directly between the split of the top and bottom section of the latch. Some latches won't have that on the 3D model. So depending on how you want to do this and how you want it to visually appear, we would generally recommend around about a 0.5 millimeter gap. You can do less if you like, but it just means when you do your render or drawings, the latch actually visually looks better. As you can see, the top and bottom sections catching the light and that sort of thing much more effectively. So when you do that construction line, as we've talked about in the other videos, it can often create some additional geometry. So we just need to delete those lines or turn them into construction lines, just so that they don't interfere with any of the sketches. So we can now turn those lines we created into construction lines. We'll do that on both of those, and then we'll lock them as well so they can't move within the model. So we're just doing that by clicking on the construction line and then clicking the lock symbol at the top of the screen. And then we're going to draw a construction line right down the middle. So we're going to find, if we just zoom in slightly, we can see that it's automatically finding the middle of that latch because the latch is drawn symmetrically. So you can see that we've got a green dot appearing now. It's sensing that middle point. So yeah, we'll draw the line all the way down from there down to the bottom of the latch. And again, we'll find the midpoint and it'll go green. You can also see that you get 90 degrees as well. So we can turn this into a construction line by clicking on that line, turning that into construction line and then locking it. That will put it locked in place. And then as you can see, as we've created that construction line, it's created additional geometry where it connected. So we can just, again, remove that and just double check there isn't another one. There it is at the top. And whilst we're doing that, we can see we've got one other one that's been created along the edge there. Now, to be sure that we haven't missed any of those extra lines at this point, you can essentially hide the 3D body of the latch by going down to the visibility setting and seeing there. Yeah, so at this point you can see that we've definitely captured and deleted all of the extra bits of geometry that have been created, and we've just got our construction lines, so we can now turn the body visibility back on. So at this point, we've got some locked construction lines that we can use for measurement referencing. So we'll first draw a large rectangle, which will then essentially confine and snap to these lines using measurements. So using the dimension tool, we're going to use that construction line and use the edge. Now we have a measurement that is currently reading the width of that part of the box. Same on the other side. So at this point, we'll link those two measurements together. Do that by simply clicking and then clicking again, then enter. And now if we change the dimension on the left to 40 millimeters, the other side will follow. So obviously you might want to make your cutout a slightly different size, but just for the purposes of this demonstration, we've made it a total of 80 millimeters on the cut. And we'll now do the same, but using the mid construction line and the height. And then we'll do the same again down to the bottom. And then we'll set those two dimensions, set the top one to about 28 millimeters as a starting point. And then the lower side, 55. And obviously you can change those, no problem. Final thing to do for this is to set the fillets around the edge. And we'll probably try a 10 millimeter. That should give us close enough. You click one by one the connecting lines, and that will automatically create the rounded corners for you. Because we've followed that workflow, all of those corners are now linked to this one dimension. So as an example, if we change that to 2 millimeters, you'll see them all tighten up. And if we want to set them back, change that back to 10, and there we have all of the corners set. If you're well versed with Inventor or similar sketching environment, there are multiple ways that you can achieve the shape of the cutout, but this is a very good, stable way of doing it. You can use other types of sketching, but this is a good way of doing it. So that's now done. We can finish the sketch, and that now applies that shape onto the cut underneath function. So we'll put some 5 millimeter holes on there now. So we use the cut hole function. Again, we're creating a sketch, so we have to select the face that we want it to be registered to, essentially, and linked to. So always select the face of the piece of hardware that's going to be touching the outside of the case. Right, so draw some circles using the circle function. And we're finding the middle of the current position as an easy start point. And we're just drawing these holes bigger than they need to be, just from a visual point of view for now. We don't need that one, we just need the top 3.
Oh, yeah.
So obviously these are currently oversized, but that's fine. We can change that in a moment. And obviously these sizes are as per the model, but you might want to change those. We don't need that one. So now we can go round, and probably before we go too much further, in the process of creating these circles, we've probably created some extra geometry in there we don't need, as you can see there. So by selecting over it and then deleting, and you can also do a slightly wider drag and drop, drag and click, in order to make sure that none of those inner circles, if you go slightly larger just to capture, that's it. You can just double check that there's nothing else in there. Yeah, let's just do that same function there. And then delete, just making sure there's no additional geometry on the sketch of the whole cutout. And we're doing a left to right drag, which is ensuring we're only selecting geometry that's within the box that we've drawn. Final hole. So we've now cleaned up the geometry, and we can now resize all of our drill holes. So we can do that by simply dimensioning them, clicking on the circle, and then that will give us millimeter size. Go around and do that to all of them. One more to do. At this point, we'll set one of them as a master, essentially. We'll choose top left, make that 5 millimeters. And now using the same functionality of referencing each other's geometries, click on one, then click on the master one, enter, click on the next one, then click on the master. And you're essentially just, instead of setting these as a dimension, we're setting these as a referencing another set of geometry, which means if we wanted to, which we can show you in a moment, by changing the first one to 8 millimeters, all of those holes will get bigger, and then we can change that back to 5mm. Just makes it easier for more bulk adjustments within your model. At this point, if the 3D model is perfect, you can leave it. That's all you need to do. However, very often we find that that's not the case, so you need to be able to move those holes. So what we'll do is we're going to use the dimension tool again, and we're going to set some dimensions just like we did for the rectangle. So we're now going to hide the sketch of the original cutout we did on the case. So visibility, turn that off. You can see that construction lines have now disappeared. So we just need to recreate the construction lines, but on this sketch. Very quick procedure. Obviously you could do this. You could create two sketches at the same time and do the construction lines at the same time, but this is absolutely fine. We're doing it one by one. So we turn both of those to construction. We've locked those. We can delete the extra geometry, which is showing up in yellow. And now we just need to create the center. If you zoom in, you'll see it go green when you find that midpoint on that line. And you can also check, we've got a 90° showing there as well. So we know we're dead straight. Turn that into construction line and it's locked. So now we can start dimensioning. Delete the extra geometry. And now we can start dimensioning the holes. Find the midpoint of the hole. And then use the construction line as the other reference, also referencing the height as well. So this process will take a couple of moments. So Charles is just going to fly through this. So once this is done, it takes a couple of minutes to do this, but once it's done, you have easy control over all of your holes and your cutout position for that latch. And if you already have existing DXF measurements or things like that that you are used to referencing, or jigs or whatever it might be, you can, with a little bit of maths, easily translate those measurements that you know work to this. If you have any hardware that you're unsure on or need a bit of help doing this, we are more than happy to spend one-on-one training time with any of our users just to walk through this process. Once you've done it a few times, it's very easy. And even though there's a little bit of work to do now, it makes it much easier in the future. Okay, so now we can actually link some of those measurements just like we did when we were linking the hole sizes. So we're now linking some of the heights, because if you know that your model is at least symmetrical, you only need to adjust maybe the position on one side, and you know that the hole will move on the other side. So we just link those together. Great. Okay. So I think we've missed the height on the middle hole.
Yeah, we have.
And top and bottom. So we can just quickly do that. Great. Okay, and there we have, I believe, all of the holes controllable. The only thing we haven't dimensioned, which you can but we won't, is the middle hole should obviously be center, and it currently is. So if for whatever reason it wasn't, you could control the position of the middle hole by referencing that, but we don't need to because it's essentially 0mm offset. Okay, so we can now save that sketch. Great, all of those sketches are now saved. Yeah, we can turn the visibility on for both of those sketches. So you can see we've got all of the sketches there. Great. Okay, and now we apply an appearance to the latch. So, do you want to take over this part?
Yeah. So when you're applying appearances to your latch, what you need to do is you need to first select the appearances. Once you open up this window here, this gives you access to all of the material appearances that are located inside of Autocase. To apply them to your latch, what you need to do is select all of the parts you've got. You can go through and search and select whatever appearance you want, but what I tend to do is select a selection of favorites, so it's easy for me to make sure that all my hardware has the same finish at every time. So what I'm going to do is go through steel polished, and that has now applied a steel polished finish to the entire latch. You can go through and change tiny little differences. So for example, something I like to do is just select these rivet heads.
So you do a shift select.
Oh yeah, stop press shift.
Yeah, so it just means when the light catches it, we're going to get a slightly, just enough of a difference to keep it looking realistic. You can obviously go deeper, and if you really want to, you can edit all the individual small bodies.
Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, that's essentially the way of adding appearances to your latch. And then what we need to do is we need to select the entire piece of hardware, go to material, and to select material. The reason we do this is it basically sets the weight of the mass of the latch. So when we add it to the case and we do a calculation of all the weights, it knows exactly what the additional weight is going to be applied to the case by the amount of hardware that's been added. That's adding appearances and adding material.
Okay, so we need to add a point to this latch, which will define where it's going to sit on the case. So we do that by using the work plane feature. We're going to use mid-plane between two planes to generate us some mid-planes. So we're going to use the right-hand side and the left-hand side of the latch. That's created us a vertical work plane. We now need to create a work plane that is right down the middle of where the top and bottom part of the latch join. So we can, again, same function. We're using the mid-plane between the two planes. So we're going to select the top part of the latch and then the bottom part, those two faces. We now have a horizontal work plane. And the final thing we need to do is essentially creating a point. We're going to select point, intersection of three planes, and then we're choosing the two work planes we created and the face that's going to be sitting against the case plywood. So if you look closely, there is now a small point that has been created within the model. So we now need to add the placement. So we use the add placement function. And if you then hover in the middle, you'll find your point and you'll see it highlighting there. Click on it, and that's now added the point. And then if you take open this point, Charles.
That's fine. So the importance of this placement is to allow Autocase to understand where the latch is being placed on the case. So we're giving it its coordinates so it knows which way up the latch is supposed to be. So we're going to choose this line here, which then sets our x-axis. We then are going to select a line that is going vertically, that sets our y-axis, and that means that we get this little triode that shows which is our y, orange is the x, and z is the blue. You'll always want it that the z-axis is pointing out of the latch. So it needs to look exactly like this. If it's not looking like this, you can use these reverse to be able to orientate it the way that is being shown currently on screen. And then we click OK, and that is its placement.
And then we're going to add it to the library.
Yeah.
Choose your library name. We can put it in there. That's fine. Choose the type. So it's a latch. Then we can just give it a SKU. We can call it test latch name, test latch name. And then labor timing is how long it takes you to put this on the case. If you're cutting a hole, if you're not cutting a hole, you can calculate that. So let's say 3 minutes as an example. The supplier, this could be, this is Adam Hall. So put in the name of your supplier. Make sure you type it the same as you have done previously to ensure they all come under the same filter. We have a 27mm crank on this, and then we can just type in Adam Hall latch You could obviously type in whatever you want into these fields, but we're just doing it for the purpose of the demonstration. The unit in this scenario is piece because we're not pricing per meter. And let's just say £10 as an example. And then finally, the last step is to select the placement method, which in this scenario is linear. And it will then find the hybrid and move along the hybrid and lock it to the hybrid. So we've done that. We've created the latch. As a final test here, if we just create a new project really quickly, just give it a quick name. Yeah, choose a case style. We'll just choose some default materials just to get us going. And then we'll be able to check that this latch is operating and placing correctly. So we'll go to the place function. We can select the library we know it's in. There's our latch. And then we'll select the latch, hit the tick, choose an anchor point, and then we can position the latch and place it. And then we can now see, if we click on the latch and then use the view cube, we can rotate round to that latch, get a slight side-on view to make sure that it's sitting correctly, which it is. And then as a final check, if we go to the internal design, rotate round, we'll be able to see the cutout and the holes. And that latch is ready and tested, ready for use in case design.